Is this version of the Dallas Cowboys better than the 2022 and 2021 teams? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That is JASE Medical.com. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We've got a bunch of really good questions lined up for you today, getting you ready for the Cowboys-Packers playoff game in round one. Landon, let's start with this question from John. He wants to know, what makes this year's team stand out compared to the 2022 and 2021 teams?
It's a good question, right? And I think, part of it is going to be the situation. I think we should start there, right? Like the Cowboys are just in a better playoff situation than they were in either one of those 2 years. And that doesn't just include the seeding and the playoff, home field situation. It includes the teams that are in the playoffs. It feels like there are less viable NFC teams in the playoffs than there were in the previous 2 seasons. Maybe you disagree with that, but to me, it seems like...
No, I agree.
I think that it feels like the NFC has a kind of a weaker playoff crop than they had in previous years, right? I also think that as far as the team themselves, I think that this is a team that is a lot sharper going into the playoffs than they have been in the previous 2 years. And I would say especially 2 years ago, it feels like, where, they've had stuff to play for this entire time. Even in the year before when they played Washington at the end of the year last year, it was kind of a, it was like the Eagles playing the Giants, whereas you didn't really, it was a half in, half out game. I think it had negative effects on the team. Ultimately, they were able to turn around and beat Tampa Bay because I think there was so much invested there. But I do think that the team wasn't going into the playoffs nearly as sharp as they were, as they are now. And I will also add that I feel like there are a handful of players, and you and I were talking before the show about this, and I listed them off, and I realized they all kind of have one thing in common. There's a handful of players that I listed: Pollard, Jordan Lewis, Donovan Wilson, that have started playing some of their best football now, that are kind of ascending into the playoffs. And I realized, as I was saying it, that those were all 3 guys who came into the season with pretty serious injury concerns that have been working their way through it, right? So, and then another guy that I thought has really kind of come on a little bit is Clark. So I think that the core group of your guys are in better situations. They're playing at a higher level. They're more rested than they have been before. And think about I think I did the math the other day. I think the Cowboys got, or at least specifically Dak Prescott got something like 63 snaps off this season due to the Cowboys blowouts. And that's not just Dak Prescott, right? I just did Dak because he's kind of a good indicator of when the Cowboys started pulling their starters, right? But there are other players that obviously got pulled at the same time. So I guess this is all a way of saying they've been through the season with a sharp edge, but they also don't have nearly as many snaps on their body as they probably did at this point last year. So those are all reasons that I'm a little bit more optimistic about where this team is in previous years. But ultimately, I think the biggest difference is just going to be going out there and winning it. I don't know that it's so markedly different that it's this and that. It's just how they actually play on the day that's going to be the difference.
So I think this team is better than the 2022 team because last year, remember what was going on at the end of the year last year? Michael Gallup was a shell of himself. They didn't have a number 2 receiver. When we talked about that on yesterday's show, they were just trying to cobble together that number 2 receiver. And then think about what they had at cornerback, Mackenzie Alexander and Xavier Rhodes were playing Trayvon Mullen was another guy that they brought in. They were just throwing anything against the wall. to try to find competent cornerback play. And then on top of that, Dak, I think Dak's performance last year was better than what the national media suggested. But there's no question that Dak is playing better now than he was last year. I think the 2021 team, though, is better than this one for a couple of reasons. Number one, you just had more weapons. I mean, you had year two, CeeDee Lamb. Amari Cooper had a huge playoff game against the 49ers. Your defense was really healthy. You had Randy Gregory, who played really well. You had Leighton Vander Esch, who played really well. You had depth on the offensive line. Remember, they were rotating Lyle Collins and Terrence Steele in that playoff game against the Niners in 2021. So and Dak also had a fantastic year that season. I think that team was better. But I without a doubt, I feel better about this team than I did last year's team, without a doubt.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to push back because to me, Dak Prescott's a much better quarterback than he even was in 2021. And
I just think they had more weapons and the offensive line was younger.
Maybe, but I also think he's more comfortable and he's producing at a more efficient and more reliable manner than it felt like. It felt like there was a lot of boom and bust in the 2020.
The other thing, I think they could run the ball a lot better in 2021 than they could this year. Consistently. Maybe that's just because Pollard was healthier. They did have Zeke, who had a nice year that season.
Yeah, I mean that I would definitely agree. It feels like they are not running the ball the same way, but yeah, I mean I tend to think that the offense might be better than it was at this point of the season than at that point of the season in 2021. But yeah, we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, we'll find out. The one injury that still bothers me is Leighton Vander Esch, just because if you happen to get into one of these games where the Packers want to try to run the ball 30 times and just make it where each team only has 7 possessions, I'm not sure they have personnel on defense to do that. If they had a healthy Vander Esch, I would feel so much better about their ability to stop the run. That is just the one spot that still does give me a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's legitimate. I do think that, you know, a lot of our opinion on how this team plays the run is based on games that Jonathan Hankins was not in.
That does help. Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, Jonathan Hankins played last week. I got to assume that he's going to be even a little bit healthier than he was.
He played great. He played great last week, by the way. He played one of his best games last week.
So assuming he can play at the level that we've become accustomed to, I also would say Donovan Wilson has just played better the last couple of weeks, and he's going to be really important when it comes to filling lanes and taking on guards and making, run stuffs. Those two guys getting back to the level that they were like at last year does make me feel somewhat better.
And I'll also say that I think, Leighton Vander Esch was around for the last time the Cowboys played the Packers in the playoffs, wasn't he? I think, am I misremembering? Maybe he wasn't, but no. I think one thing it was 2016. So it was
2016. Yeah. A couple years before.
But I think that one thing that, was a problem the last time the Cowboys played the Packers was Aaron Jones. And it wasn't just running the football, it was receiving as well. I think that the Packers are not going to be able to beat us with speed this time with our linebacker core. So if they're going to want to try to pound the rock and limit possessions, that's fine. That's likely we'll do. The Cowboys are going to need to stop that. But I think that also puts more onus on the Packers defense to try to stop the Cowboys passing attack, which again is the biggest disadvantage between these two teams.
All right, Landon, let's talk about which year 2 player improved the most during the 2023 season. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's just talk for a minute about prepping for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics such as amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That is terrifying. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than my son or my daughter getting sick during a supply chain issue that's keeping them from getting the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we're going to be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular costs. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. This is the most fun that I've ever had playing DFS because there's just so many different players and so many different stat projections to choose from. It's absolutely incredible. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return for the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Landon, our next question comes from Goran. He wants to know, in your opinion, who improved more from their rookie season, Tyler Smith or Deron Bland?
This is a really tough one because both of these guys kind of played slightly different positions than they're playing this year. And yeah, both of them. I can't remember. Did Deron Bland actually get selected to the NFLPA?
Yes,
All Pro team?
Yes, yep.
Well, so both of them made the All Pro team this year. Obviously Tyler Smith playing mostly tackle outside and then kind of switching back inside the guard after doing all of a training camp of 2022 at guard. I tend to think that it's probably Smith. I think that he, when he was healthy, was maybe the best offensive lineman on this team that didn't have his same last name. Let's say that
qualifier.
Yeah, I kind of invented that qualifier as I got halfway through the sentence. I think it's tough because Zach Martin is Zach Martin. Zach Martin's had a very difficult season. He's been battling an ankle thing, it feels like, all year. I just think that when Tyler Smith has been healthy, he's been dominant. And it's just been great to watch. I think Deron Bland has certainly improved and has been incredible this year. But I also think that he was pretty great last year, and I don't know that his improvement is so drastic as much as the opportunity, I feel like he had this in him last year. I feel like, he had a lot of interceptions last year too. So I think I'm going to go with Tyler Smith simply because I think the skill has improved in such a way, especially in comparison to where we thought he was as a tackle coming into college. I think of Bland more as a guy that the rest of the NFL just missed on, right? Like he came into the NFL pretty well formed. It's not like we saw a huge trajectory of improvement. I think we have seen him improve. I think he came in way more developed than the NFL was ready to admit. I think there are statistics about his college game that kind of bear that out. He was rated as one of the best man coverage corners by a couple different scouting services, and just kind of fell to the 5th round because of, I think, maybe where he went to school and the competition he played.
This was tough because I guess if I would have told you going into the year that Tyler Smith is going to be a Pro Bowl left guard, I don't think you would have been all that surprised because he played so well at left tackle. You just kind of assumed that moving inside the guard would make him a better player. If I would have told you that Deron Bland was going to lead the NFL in interceptions and break a Dallas Cowboy record or an NFL record for the most touchdowns or pick sixes in a season, you would have thought that's crazy. So that's why I think I'm going to go with Deron Bland. Like, he had an amazing rookie season, and then he went on to have an historic season for a cornerback. So I'm going with Bland. I also love that Bland's been able to play inside, outside.
And outside, yeah.
Yeah, and outside of the one game against Seattle, which he really struggled. He had a really bad game. There really wasn't many other games in which he struggled. He ended up being Pro Football Focus as number 2 rated cornerback on the season. His coverage grade outside of just the interceptions was unbelievable. He didn't give up a lot of separation. I guess I'm more surprised that Deron Bland went from a nice rookie season to potentially an all-pro corner than Tyler Smith going from a good left tackle to potentially an all-pro guard.
And that totally makes sense. And I think to me, it's like, are we talking about production or are we talking about, skill?
It's hard. Both those guys had such big years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're very similar in the sense that they kind of, greatly exceeded our expectations. So, and I also think expectations is a part of this, obviously, when you're talking about most improved. So, I think either way, Cowboys are thrilled with both the way these guys.
Now, if we remove those 2 draft picks, who would be the next guy from the 2022 class? Go ahead.
Bell. Marquise Bell. Oh, I was gonna say, I don't know if was he the 2022 class?
Well, he was an undrafted free agent.
Undrafted free agent. Okay, yeah, I would say Marquise Bell. I mean, just like he went from being an unplaying safety to your starting linebacker overnight. Without kind of in this almost in the same way that Brock Hoffman became a guard on Sunday, right? Like just suddenly you're the linebacker now. I harped on that a lot this season, and I'm going to continue to harp on it. That's incredible thing.
And even if he's not like a long-term solution at linebacker, and he ends up becoming like your third guy, or he becomes a rotational piece to basically get something out of nothing. I mean, he was on the 53-man roster last year, but he didn't really do anything besides play special teams. He was a healthy scratch in a lot of games. To come in and start a majority of the games at linebacker for you this year and not get you killed in most games is a huge win. Huge win.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, look, we say what we say about getting, running inside, but it's just not a part of the game as much as it used to be anymore, right? No. It's just having that as a weakness. If you're going to choose your weakness, being a little bit weak inside on the running game is probably it, right? Because it's easy to mitigate an inside running game, right? He the way he flows to the football, the way we've seen him take on blockers at 207 pounds, like it's just really, really impressive to watch him play football.
I agree. We should also mention, I thought Damone Clark played better in year 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think some people are still hoping that he would have a bigger leap, but definitely think he got better.
Tolbert.
Since even Jalen Tolbert, the numbers, are better. They're not significantly better, but I think you just feel a lot better about Jalen Tolbert on the field now than you did a year ago.
If you watch him this year versus last year, it's night and day. And I am just thrilled. I cannot wait to see what he looks like next year. I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how the Cowboys kind of handle their wide receiver core going into the offseason, because they redid Brandon Cooks' deal, so he'll be back, but he's going to be 31 going into year 11. Do the Cowboys go out and aggressively try to get, somebody who could eventually be the wide receiver 2? Or do they feel like Jalen Tolbert in year 3 is ready to have a bigger role? I can't wait to see it. Later, we got another question from @Jones's Babysitter about some wrinkles on both sides of the ball. And if we'll see them against the Packers, we will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we get obsessed with how to change ourselves. Instead of just expanding on what we're already doing right, maybe you finally organize one part of your house or your apartment, and now you want to tackle another. Or maybe you're taking your supplements every morning, and now you want to eat a healthier breakfast and work out in the morning. That helps too. Therapy helps you find your strength so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that will actually stick. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Celebrate the progress that you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every dayers on tomorrow's show, we've got Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers. Peter, it's going to be quite a crossover show. So make sure you guys.
It really is.
The Packer guys are already very, very confident in this game, so I cannot wait to chat with Peter. You're going to want to make sure you guys tune in for that. Later, let's answer one more question. This is from @Jones's babysitter. He wants to know: do we expect the Cowboys to use some different offensive and defensive wrinkles to take advantage of some of Green Bay's weaknesses here in round one?
Yeah, I mean, I expect some wrinkle stuff to show up. I don't know if they necessarily needed to take advantage of what Green Bay's got on defense, but I do think that they, look, we talked about it. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago that we haven't seen it was yesterday. We haven't seen a Turpin pass I think we saw one target in the last 3 games. And this is after having a lot of success kind of targeting him or using him in that way. So I would not at all be shocked if they found a way they will obviously work him in as like they give handoffs, reverse, that sort of thing. But I think specifically seeing him kind of get out and pass or finding ways to scheme him targets where he's open, I think that's going to be something that we'll likely see. I mean, I also think that we've kind of seen some other stuff that they have that they've used that they may kind of expand on. We've seen some of the kind of zone read stuff or some interesting kind of reverse zone read stuff. So maybe they have some wrinkles off of that, constraints against those plays. There's always something that these guys kind of hold on to in their back pocket, usually something that is set up by a play that they ran earlier in the season that they put on tape that they have some sort of variation on, so that teams that are using their film study to kind of study the Cowboys, they see, they ran a Seattle concept whenever they line up in this formation, and then suddenly instead of running the over route, you're running a over in route, and you're wide open because the cornerback expects you to break outside, not inside. So it's stuff like that may be difficult for us to kind of notice in the moment, but when you go back and see it and you see the way that the concepts work, you're like, oh wait, that's slightly different than what we saw previous to the season. That's how these guys use wrinkles. For us, for like the layman, it's like, oh, I saw a double reverse pass,
flea flicker,
flicker, wow. But like for these guys, wrinkles is, hey, you set up a baseline of what your established plays are. Hey, these guys run outside zone all the time. These guys run sail all the time. They run stick flat all the time. And what they do is they make those tendencies work against the defense by lining up in that same formation and then running it in a different way that gets them wide open and uses that anticipation against the defense.
Yeah, I'll just go through all 3 phases really quickly. I think on offense, you'll probably see some new wrinkles in the red zone, if I had to guess. It may be some stuff in like the low red zone when they get inside the 10-yard line, just to make sure they get touchdowns rather than field goals. On defense, I think they're going to be really creative on defense, because the last thing you want Jordan Love to do is feel comfortable in the pocket. Yep. So maybe you'll see Jordan Lewis on some more slot blitzes. And maybe you'll see Micah Parsons lining up more over the top of the center on second down, just to give them different looks. And then on special teams, they've had some major issues on special teams. Green Bay has. So maybe you'll see some different punt block looks or some different field goal block looks. That's where I anticipate all this happening.
Yeah, on the defensive side, kind of go back to your point there. Jordan Love is another one of these guys where maybe you start seeing some sim pressure stuff, right? Because he is good against the blitz, but he's not good against pressure, right? So you want to get pressure on him, but you don't necessarily want to overexert.
You don't want players 7-guy blitzes or anything.
You don't want to leave holes in the back end of your pass defense, because that's where he'll exploit. Yeah. So you want him to not know where to go and then freeze. That's what young quarterbacks do, is that they feel the pressure, they look around, there's nowhere to go, and then they don't know what to do. Exactly. He'll try to escape, he'll try to get out and create different angles, and that's a whole different part of the snap that you have to deal with. I'll take my chances with him trying to escape while Micah Parsons chasing him. Yep. I'll take that every time. I do. Can I just go to diatribe real quick? Because I reminded me real quick in the game last week. There was a period in which Howell was rolling to his right, and I think in the low red zone, like you mentioned, right? And there was a running back coming across. It's a broken play. They're trying to make something happen. There's a running back coming across, and Damone Clark is in front of him. And there's like kind of this thing where they're trying to get Clark in a conflict where, are you going to come cover me to make sure I don't hit the pylon, or are you going to cover the guy? And Clark, you can see it on tape in the end zone. Clark sees Micah Parsons chasing Sam Howell and stops running to the corner because he's like, oh, I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, crazy.
Parsons going to get him. I've never seen that happen before in an NFL game. And he just stops so he can cover the guy because he knows that he's not beating Parsons to the corner. That just shows you kind of athlete that we're dealing with here.
I expect the Cowboys to be aggressive, and they're going to have one or two tricks up their sleeves, just that they've been saving for the playoffs game. So certainly keep an eye on that. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go follow the podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for our crossover show with Peter Bukowski. Go follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosier. And we will see you right back here tomorrow.